the whole topic of having an entrepreneurial mindset, I was really blessed at day one to have that. My father was an entrepreneur, a rather nutty one. He started a bunch of businesses. Some failed, some didn't, but they gave me the greatest gift in life, because the more, when you grow up, everything you see is a positive. And the more you go through in life, here's one of my quotes: the more you know hell, the more you appreciate heaven in life, right? So anyway, so the story, she's like, just tell your story. And I'm like, okay. So my story begins when I was a kid. I was selling pencils for 10 cents each in second grade, and bubble gum, and getting in trouble because everyone was putting their gum on the floors and the whole thing. So my whole life I've been an entrepreneur. My family went through a major disaster, and my whole life fell apart at 16. And all I had to do was figure out, okay, I'm just gonna make it and just go work. So I ended up having two jobs after high school, and I saved all my money because I was one day I'm gonna start my own business. And after high school, I literally could not get into any college because I didn't focus on school, I focused on work. And luckily, my aunt in my life, from San Francisco. Now, I grew up in a little town of 2,500 people in Ohio. So I'm really a country bumpkin. I know I don't look it and I don't talk it, but I really am. Because you can take a girl out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the girl. So anyway, so she says, let me send you to the school in Boston. I can get you in, don't worry about it. I'm like, well, okay, what's this college? And she's like, it's a small school, it's an old finishing school, turned 4-year liberal arts school for women. 300 women. I'm like, you're sending me to a school in Boston with 300 women? What am I going to do there? So she's like, just go, take your time. It's in the center of Boston. There's so many people there. You'll be open to the world. Just go do it. And you just have to pay for your spending money and your books and all that kind of stuff. So I went to college in Boston. My roommate ended up being the president of Indonesia's daughter. And all of a sudden now, I came from this little town in Ohio, and I'm now open to the whole entire world, because this school had 40% international students. And where I thought, my life, I thought, wow, Ohio, where I came from, was the cutest little town. It was really nice, but now I'm open. I never even heard of a country called Turkey, right? I only knew that for Thanksgiving. And because I didn't really focus at school. So anyways, so fast forward, I had to get a job, in college. So I ended up being a club promoter. And everyone needed to get in, and they needed to know me to get in, right? So this became who knew when I was 18 years old, outside of the club, and everyone had to get into the club, that I would know everyone. And I was nice to everybody, because I was never that mean club person who wouldn't let you in. I was I was nice to everyone. So I knew all the people in town who always wanted to go to this club, right? And fast forward, I moved to Istanbul, Turkey, with my boyfriend from college, who ended up becoming a famous pop singer in Turkey. Typical. Anyways, fast forward. So fast forward, then I went to Russia after that, because I didn't want to get married. And I was never going to learn Turkish. I'm not really good at languages. You either are or you're not. I was not. And I moved to Russia with somebody else I knew from college, who I used to let into the club. And we started a business. In my first business, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. But I just knew, I never wanted to go back to Ohio. And I knew I just had to do it, right? So I basically brought Valentino, Ungaro, Jean-Francois Ferré into Russia. We would buy all the old stock that wouldn't flood the existing markets, and we would ship it in 20-foot containers, SGS inspected, 10 cents on the dollar, and at that time, the Russians would pay whatever for any kind of designer label, whether it fit them or not, right? So after literally, remember, I'm from Ohio, I'm in Russia, I'm in Turkey, I'm my life is really fast-paced, right? Anyway, so fast forward, I'm sitting there, and I'm after about a year and a half, flying to Italy, buying this stuff, not really, and I had the cash because the Russian partner, who's now an oligarch in New York, the Russian partner, would just wire cash. It was the weirdest thing, but I'm a very honest person, so I was always doing it and flying and da-da-da. So anyways, fast forward, after that crazy life, I decided, where else could I go but New York City, right? So I ended up flying to New York City and getting an apartment, and I was lucky. I did pretty well. I didn't realize how expensive New York would be, because I'm from Ohio. And so I moved to New York, and when I get to New York, I befriended a homeless person. And I would see this guy, he was on my corner, and I would see him every day. And I used to talk to him, because I love people. And I would say, hey, why don't you get a job and stuff? He's like, I make more money sitting here than working at McDonald's. Why in the world would I want to go put on that uniform and and sell French fries? You know what I mean? So I'm like, oh, wow. I said, that's really interesting. So I literally that afternoon, like one of those afternoons, I called up and searched and researched, and I found an organization called Coalition for the Homeless. And I said, is there anything I can do to help you? I would love to learn more about this. And I ended up volunteering for 6 months, and I would feed 1,000 people a week. The ham sandwich, the milk, the apple, which I'm a vegetarian, I would never eat. And literally these people would be so grateful and smile, maybe have 2 teeth, and be like, oh my gosh, thank you for these meals. And I would go home, take a shower, go out with my friends to some hot, fun restaurant, and be like, whoa, what a day, right? And I was like, wow, I had more fun during the day doing that than I could ever have at this dinner. Didn't matter where we were or whatever. So that's when I realized, wow, I'm going to be an entrepreneur again. Because by the way, I forgot to tell you this. When I graduated from college, I sent out 300 resumes. No one even called me back or gave me a job. So anyways, fast forward. I was grateful. Thank you. Everything's a positive in life. Whether you know it in a week, a year, 10 years, whatever happens to you, you're lucky. Because you're going to realize in your future why it happened. So fast forward. I decided to help homeless people. So I did 2 cookbooks, one called A Musical Feast, one called An All-Star Feast, and raised $500,000 for the homeless. And I got Madonna and all these people to do their recipes. And that was everyone's like, well, how did you get Madonna? And how'd you get all these people to do it? Oh my gosh, I knew the hairdresser, I knew the driver, I knew the cousin. Because I was always open to people. And it wasn't about me, it was about finding out about the people and about listening, which is key. So after doing that, I was alone in New York, and I adopted my dog and cat from the shelter. And when I went to the shelter, I was like, what? I could get a purebred Maltese? I was like, oh my gosh. And what do you mean there's 12 million animals? And I did the research after I left and I got my dog. I was like, wow, there's 12 million animals euthanized a year. At that time, I was just, wow. And I looked around the landscape, and the only thing people were discussing was breeders and dog shows, but nobody at that time was talking about animal rescue. And I knew, because of what I did with the cookbooks, and thanks to the homeless guy, by the way, because if I didn't talk to him, I would have never been inspired to do the books. So then I was like, wow, if I could create a media company, no idea about publishing, if I could create a media company and bring celebrities and pop culture to the animal rescue world and bring awareness towards the importance of adopting, you can adopt any breed, any size, any color, one-legged, two-legged, four-legged, whatever, you could adopt any dog you wanted. We could change that number and bring it down. So I launched the very first media company called Animal Fair. We brought our first cover was Renee Zellweger. We had Charlize Theron on the cover, Diane Lane, Eric McCormick, and I created the very first pet fashion show in history. Because I knew that if people saw dogs dressed up in Burberry or whatever, and they were rescue dogs, that they would cover it. And they would bring awareness to that, right? So 10 books later, if anybody wants to go, you could get it on eBay for $1. How to understand men through their dogs, how to understand women through their cats, how to train your boss to roll over. So I have 10 books out, and then of course I have 3 Guinness World Records because I'm that kind of kooky person. I basically, because of my career and because of all my world, and at the time it was pre-social media, right? And I would be with all these like famous people, again, networking, knowing out, you know what I mean? Just being nice to everyone. I met all these famous people, but I didn't want to take pictures with them because I didn't really know them. But I always wanted to remember the moment, right? So I'd always be like, oh my gosh, my dog is your biggest fan. Would you take a picture? And that's how I got my first Guinness World Record. And so I have the dog most photographed with celebrities, like Kanye West, Kim Kardashian, President Obama, like all these people. And they weren't like, paparazzi photos. They were actually real photos. That means I got to meet them too. But anyway, so I did all this, kind of stuff to bring awareness towards important issues, right? And I was on the Today Show like literally once a month, and I had a primetime show on CBS. And then I got really blessed. I didn't know it at the time, but I got blessed with some kooky, mentally ill. You can't explain mentally ill people, so don't even waste your time. She basically became my stalker and my bully, who basically ruined my life. So, but when you're at that stage, so all of a sudden now, like I'm on the Today Show, I have a primetime show on CBS. A year later, all of a sudden no one's even calling me anymore. It was like the weirdest thing, and I figured it all out. I found 10 other victims of this woman. She would go to Starbucks in the library to send the email so you can track the IP. Spent a fortune on lawyers, but there was nothing you could do. So one of the commitments I made, let's go back to my father. So my father, so my parents were not the greatest role models, let's put it that way. But I was always positive, and I always just was like, oh, I'm gonna just, I'll make it happen, right? Anyway, so when my father was, dying, I was like, oh my gosh, thank you for being so crazy, because if you weren't so crazy, this was to my father literally in the last days. Thank you for being so crazy, because if you weren't so crazy, I wouldn't be who I am today, and I'm grateful. Like, wow, like I feel so resilient, right? So anyways, I made a commitment to myself that I would go to 2 new countries a year, every year of my life. And, okay, is it that long? Holy cow, shoot. Okay, so anyways, I'll fast forward. Anyway, so I ended up in Honduras on vacation. When I booked it, I didn't realize it was the murder capital of the world. Anyways, but it was like December, and I have to go to 2 new countries a year. So I went to Honduras. I was so blessed that it was the murder capital of the year, because I wouldn't have been able to create this movement. So fast forward, I ended up volunteering for an organization that gives microloans to poor women. I was supposed to spend 2 hours. I spent 3 days, slept on a dirt floor, couldn't get the grin off my face talking to these women that received $100 microloans. One woman, I'll give you the quick story. One woman was 72 years old. Her daughter died, left her with 3 little kids. The husband ran off. She got a $100 microloan, opened up a little pulperia in her little home, and was able to pay the $1 a month for those kids to go to school. And I just spent those days seeing that, and that's what I realized in 2013. If I can take what I did in the animal world and simplify the message of why it's so important to empower women in business. Because when these women get these microloans, they pay them back at a 97% rate. 97, men in the 60% range. 90% of that money goes to educate their children, provide for their families. And when children are educated, they're less likely to harm animals, and they believe in the dream. And when women are empowered in business, they have self-confidence and dignity. They don't allow human rights violations. So that was the basis for this whole movement. So I went back to New York. I got Governor Cuomo, Mayor de Blasio to proclaim the day officially on November 19th. I then went around the world to everyone I went to college with, everyone I worked with, and everyone around the world. And I said, who in your country or who in your city is the best person to represent our movement? And that's how we are celebrated now in 144 countries. And that's how we have the royal family of Qatar, and we have some of the incredible people. And then, and what we're doing around the world is we're bringing awareness on a ground-up approach. Because if we can embrace everyone in the world to understand why it's so important, we can change the dynamic. Because change doesn't happen from the top, as we see it with the government and nothing's happening. So, but if we can embrace everyone in the world to understand why it's so important to empower women in business, we can see the change. Thank you. Oh, and thank you to Alyssa. And one of the things I want to say is, this is kind of funny. So literally, I met Alyssa when we were in the State Department, and we partnered with a big organization. This is like typical what happens to women in business. We partnered with this big organization, and the first time I meet the guy that runs this big organization, you know what he said to me? I wasn't expecting you. I don't know what that means. Anyway, so fast forward. And he was like, I wasn't expecting you, and that was it. And then when we went at the State Department, he says about our partnership, Women's Entrepreneurship Day was a little blip on the screen. Fast forward, he appropriated our day, this big global movement, but there's always a positive, right? By the way, we got a huge law firm, Kirkland & Ellis, to be our pro bono attorneys because of him, and they're still our pro bono attorneys 4 years later. But we found Alyssa. So anyways, I want to say thank you for having me. Yeah. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me. Oh, can I give you my 5 things?
We have time for Q&A. So who has questions for Wendy? I'm sure. Don't be shy. Oh. Stand up. Oh.
So what's your biggest takeaway through different stages? What's your biggest takeaway through different stages in your experience?
So I have 5 P's, all right? And one of them is pluck. Get back up. Like meaning, you know what? If you really believe in something, you need to have the passion. You need to have the perseverance. You need to have the persistence. You need to be positive, but really one of the words, you have to have pluck. When things go down, you got to get back up. And I think that's, if you believe in something, keep your day job. You got to pay the rent, you got to eat, but, you got to just have that mindset. And taking. That's funny. I could use that. I'll take. Thank you. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
Thank you so much. So with all your travels, I'm just wondering how you figured out staying places and how you kept those connections and how you furthered those connections when you were doing the traveling.
Oh, interesting. So I've been based in New York now I never talk about time, right? Because you can never lose your inner child, right? So I'm never talking, I'm ageless. Anyway, but I've been in New York for a long time. It is my home. They say the happiest people in the world have a purpose and a home. And so I've had my home in New York for a long time. I go away probably out of a year, maybe 2 months out of the year, or maybe 3, yeah. But and keeping in touch with people, let's be honest. Social media is amazing. And it's easy now. I wish we had social media when I was in college. Think about my life then. I would have known more people, right? So I think social media is great. So that's how. And then actually, this has been a greatest gift to me. By the way, I thank my stalker bully more than anything. Because if she didn't do this to me, I would never be doing this. This is fantastic. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like I grew up a little bit. I'm never going to grow up, but you know what I mean? I grew up a little bit from this.
Hi, your personality is great.
Where is she?
Here I am, back here. Hi.
Oh, okay,
woo! Red and black,
I'm always in the back of the room, too.
But I wanted to ask you, so you have a great personality, but how do you deal with rejection? So you've been able to be very successful and get celebrities and different people to kind of help out with your cause, but I have to believe that it wasn't all easy. So
are you kidding? It's impossible, and to this day is impossible. First of all, we're not in competition with anyone, this movement, right? We're about let's all come together, right? But it's, what happens is what I say is fame, money, and power is not part of our equation, right? Ours is about purpose. And so, I think, rejection, here's how I do it. I'll give you one point. I would go to different foundations to say, could you support us? Oh, by the way, we're 100% all volunteer. I do this for free. So does Alyssa. So we're 100% volunteers around the world. And, some of, the impact that we've had is incredible. But one of the things I will say is I would go to foundations and they would say no. Or they'd be like, well, what do you mean you're volunteer and you're doing all this stuff? And they wouldn't give it. And I'd be like, yeah, I'm actually doing it because I care. You know what I mean? Like we're doing this. We're all doing this because we care. So how did I take that rejection? I said, well, wow, I'm going to now, I said, I'm taking my own advice, right? Give a hand up, not a hand out, right? I don't want any more handouts. And I got back into business. So now I partnered with a self-made billionaire, and we invest in AI, robotics, blockchain. And so I'm now like, okay, I'm going to make money because I'm going to fund this foundation. I'm going to create the biggest movement to empower women in business to alleviate poverty. And the goal would be that there is no more poverty and everyone has an equal chance in this world. And so I had to take that rejection, and believe me, I'm like, how, you're funding this thing and they're not even doing it. So it's like all this stuff. So I'm used to that, but we just figure a way out of it. Just figure a way, move up.
So I just want to say I love your energy. Don't know if this is on, but I'm a firm believer in travel, so I think it's cool that you go so many places. Was there somewhere that's influenced you the most?
Oh, by the way, wait, I want to make you laugh. I actually helped the Lowe's hotels launch their pet program years ago. So that's why I didn't think there'd be a problem. Oh, so sorry. No, he wants to play. He gets that from me. Okay, God, sorry.
I was just saying, has there somewhere you've been that's been like the most influential for you?
Everywhere. You know what I mean? Like everywhere you go, everything you do, if you're just open, you never know who's sitting next to you. You never know. I mean, I'm telling you, the greatest, things that have happened to me have been like on a plane or, getting a coffee or talking to the Uber driver. Do you know what I mean? Like, you just never know. So Honduras, going to the murder capital of the world, changed my whole life. Look at me, I'm talking about it here, right? So you just never know. And so everywhere, like I'm one of these grateful people, like whatever I do, I'm like, oh my God, thank you. No, I can hear it.
Okay, sorry. Deanna Lovejoy. I don't usually use a microphone, so I don't usually use a microphone, so I don't know how to hold it. Oh, another one? Me? Oh, sorry for the confusion. My name's Deanna Lovejoy. I'm a country bumpkin, too.
Woohoo!
And then I moved and raised a family in the country in Morgantown. Anyway, I just wanted to know, you have a lot of passions. How do you know which one to follow when, and when it's time to hand off, like you've done what you needed to do for that cause and move on? What are your triggers for these things?
Sometimes triggers are not kind of the triggers you want, right? I mean, like I didn't want a stalker bully, so that kind of was the transition from the animal world. I had, all of a sudden, I was, like literally this woman sent 40 anonymous email addresses to destroy my life. And like people that I worked with for 10 years weren't even talking to me anymore. But what was the greatest gift? People who allow stalker, bullies, whatever, and believe it are enablers. And you know what? If anybody researched what this person said, like called up, some of the places, they would have realized it was all false, right? But so what it did, it cleaned out my life. It was the greatest gift ever. And I realized I did what I could do. Animal rescue now is on the top. There's more animal rescue groups than ever. That number from 12 million is now down to 2 million. Vanity Fair, New York Times, Forbes, when we launched, said we were the ones that brought celebrities and pop culture to the animal rescue world. So I feel like I did what I could do. I don't need credit. You know what I mean? Even though, by the way, our whole movement's about empowering, celebrating, and supporting women in business. Like that's what we should do because women are more, humble and aren't like men. Like, ooh, I did this and they didn't do anything. You know what I mean? Yeah, so, I mean, not everyone. We can't generalize. Anyway, so yeah, there you go.
So I'm glad I'm not the only one that talks to everybody and people think I'm crazy.
It's good to be a little bit crazy,
I
right?
have better luck with that in New York than I do here, to tell you the truth. Oh, okay. Stand up. I thought she said again. You know what? I never really put this together before. You said women in business, empower women in business to eliminate poverty. Could you say a couple more things about that for me, please? That's really thrilling to me.
Oh, so, this whole basis was spending that time in that community with the Adelante Foundation that's based in Honduras. And spending that time with those really impoverished women that were living on like less than $1 a day, really. And I realized, that these women, when they earned money, they were educating their children, but they really were, and the stats show it, right? And they were, educating their children, providing for their families, right? Which was bettering the whole community. So if women are in control of the money, the dedication of that money is going to go into the right places. Not saying all men are putting it into weird places, but let's be honest, we see it all the time on the, if you read the news, it's like, are you kidding me? So, I mean, that was the whole basis for this, was, wow, if we could just, bring awareness towards why we need to empower women in business, why we need to give women a chance. Again, 90% of that money goes to educate their children, provide for their families. When a child is educated, they're less likely to be a terrorist. They're less likely to do bad things, right? And it just betters the whole entire community, and it uplifts the whole entire community. Yeah.
I'd like to, this is really not a question. It's a comment that supports what you've just said. When I was taking business at Women's Opportunities Resource Center here in Philadelphia, they were talking about this, empowering women with these small microloans. And they said that when money was given to the men saw it as extra income for their own expense.
Yeah.
When it was given to women, they spent it on their children.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to go into where they're going to spend it, but yeah, I agree. You know what I mean? Oh, wait. I got to do the Hedy. Does everybody, how many people raise your hand if you know who Hedy Lamarr is? Wow, this is fantastic. All right. How many people know the last words of the film? Of the Hedy Lamarr bombshell film? Did anybody see that film? Oh, okay. These are the greatest words ever. And I actually think about them every day. And I'm gonna leave you with this. Hold on. I got to get them. Okay. So Hedy Lamarr is the reason why you have the internet. Hedy Lamarr is why you email. Hedy Lamarr was one of the most brilliant actresses of our time. And she was also never recognized for her brilliance. And while she would go do a film, she would then go and meet with this composer, and they created the patent that we now use, which is the two-way that basically is the internet. And she never got credit for it till she was like 80 years old. The government never recognized it, and she never made any money from that patent. Anyways, the final words that I will leave you with that she said in this movie that were she said in this movie, but then I was like, oh my God, those are the greatest words ever. I love Hedy Lamarr, but then I found someone else did it. It was a guy. Anyways, so I was like, okay, these aren't her words, but these were the last words she said to her children. Okay, where is it? Okay, here we go. People are illogical, unreasonable, and self-centered. Love them anyway. If you do good, people will accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Do good anyway. If you are successful, you will win false friends and true enemies. Succeed anyway. The good you do today will be forgotten tomorrow. Do good anyway. Honesty and frankness make you vulnerable. Be honest and frank anyway. The biggest men and women with the biggest ideas can be shot down by the smallest men and women with the smallest minds. Think big anyway. People favor underdogs, but only follow top dogs. Fight for a few underdogs anyway. People really need help, but may attack you if you do help them. Help people anyway. Give the world the best you have, and you'll get kicked in the teeth. Give the world the best you have anyway. Woohoo! Ah!